Hello and welcome. I'm Reza Rad, and today I'm with Mark Kromer from Data Factory team in Microsoft Power BI. Hey, Mark, how are you?
Hey, Reza, I'm great. It's great to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. We really appreciate you setting the time for us to have this discussion.
Yeah.
So we want to talk about some of the areas of the product in Microsoft Fabric that you are especially working on. So tell us about what is your role, which area of the Fabric you are working with.
Yeah, definitely. Well, first of all, it's my pleasure to be here. And I'm Mark, like Reza said, and I'm a product manager for the Data Factory product within Fabric and Azure. And I've been with the Data Factory team now for a little over 8 years. And so I've seen it come up from Azure Data Factory V1 to V2, where we have today. And the most exciting part of this is the past couple of years we've been building Fabric, and we've expanded Data Factory within Fabric. It's just a super important, fundamental part of the platform of Fabric. So that's what I focus on. I'm a team lead for the team, so that means that we have a series of product managers that work on many different areas. I focus primarily on ADF and Data Factory and Fabric in terms of pipelines, CI/CD, data ops, that whole area. As well as the area of observability and, my gosh, also upgrades from ADF. So there's a lot of different areas that I cover within the product, but happy to talk to you about those things today.
That sounds great. And it is great that you come from ADF now into Fabric Data Factory, because that is one of the kind of questions that we have a lot with the users, customers. They are using ADF already as your Data Factory. They are thinking, like, shall they move to Data Factory in Fabric? What things they will miss if they do that? What are the things that they want? Can you share a little bit of your experience on that side?
Yeah, that's a very super important topic and top of mind topic. A lot that came up at the conference that we were at just a few weeks ago. In fact, I did a session on this. Was for our customers who are ADF customers, and they want to get onto the modernized platform that is Power BI based, which is Fabric, right? Because the ADF that you have in Azure is Azure portal based. It's a PaaS kind of solution, and that SaaS solution is what Fabric is. And so how do you get from there to here is essentially a really important topic. And we had a lot of discussion on this that week. And basically what customers are looking at doing is taking what they have. If they have, sometimes we have customers who have hundreds and thousands of pipelines and data flows and whatnot inside of Azure. And to get those into Fabric, really what you do is you look at, first, there's this feature that we have. It's really important, if you haven't heard about this, it's really important to take a look at it. We call it, essentially, colloquially, we call it mounting within Fabric. It actually shows up in your Fabric workspace. When you log in, you'll see the ability to create a new Azure Data Factory item. It's really cool. What that actually does is that mounts your existing ADF inside of your Fabric workspace. So you can work right there with it, with your ADF inside of your Fabric workspace. That's a great step number one. Now you can use your SSIS, your mapping data flows, your self-host integration runtimes. All the goodness that is in ADF is available to you inside of your Fabric workspace, and you just work with it as it was.
So basically, you are not missing anything. You are running exactly the same ADF that we ran before in Azure portal. We are running it from the Fabric portal, right?
That's exactly right. So it gives you that sort of like single pane of glass, right? So you can have your your RTI sort of event based things there in your workspace. You can have your brand new Fabric data pipelines in the same workspace, right, the same level as your ADF that sits right there. And that way you can trigger those, you can modify it, and you can have it open in your workspace with all of your other things in your tabs on the left. And it gives you that single pane of glass to manage everything in one place.
Right. That is really cool. That is really helpful. And I think a lot of customers would love that feature. Now, another thing before we get into some of the updates of FabCon is that this is like what we talked about already, is for customers who are already using ADF and want to bring it into Fabric. What if there's a new customer who want to choose a technology? They have ADF and they have Fabric Data Factory. Which one you think is better choice for them? Do we have like more features coming in Fabric Data Factory or ADF is going to be discontinued? You share a little bit of updates on that side, please.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a really common question, right? And it's interesting because we are absolutely just heads down focused right now on Fabric Data Factory. We have a couple of things we have to do. One of them is that ADF has been a market for, I think it's over 10 years now, believe it or not. And so there's a lot of built up investment in that we want to have all of that inside of Fabric and make sure that when you're building in Fabric Data Factory, building your pipelines, your data flows, all of your ETL and data integration, that you get the same and better capabilities there, right? But there's also a set of brand new features that are really easier for us to bring to market because they're SaaS-oriented features that the Power BI platform has provided for us that we didn't have before in the Azure side of things. A good example of this, Reza, is really super simple to use activities in the pipeline. Now, by that, I mean things like there's three that are top of mind for me. One is the ability to send an email. The second is the ability to send a Teams message. So when something happens in your pipeline, like you just completed a notebook run or something failed when you went to copy data, you can send a message really easily. It was really difficult to do this in ADF because we didn't have that sort of user context of the Power BI Entra ID user that you have in Fabric now. The third one that's really been really popular is the refreshing of your semantic models. That's a really common use case that we see. So I definitely, and our whole team really highly recommends that you always start in Fabric Data Factory when you're building new pipelines. If it's a greenfield project, go there first. ADF is not, we don't have a plan to discontinue ADF, but Fabric is that modernized SaaS version of all that, right? I think that your experience is going to be much better in Fabric.
Right, and that is also one of the reasons you call it like ADF version 1 Data Factory, version 2 is like the Data Factory in Fabric, right?
No, it's actually a little different. So V1 is this old man. Don't even V1 has been discontinued. Thank goodness. V1 was we actually. You're going back in my memory now. We actually had no UI for it, Reza. It was JSON only.
Right.
So V2 came out in like 2018, I want to say, or 2017 or somewhere in that neighborhood.
It had a better UI. Yep.
And it had a UI, and it was like, wow, this is groundbreaking. We have a UI. And then what happened was, then we decided that we can make this even simpler. So it's kind of like almost like this evolution of Data Factory. It went from V1 with no UI to V2 with a beautiful UI to we need to make it even easier to use and get started. And that's what SaaS and Fabric has brought to us. And so we're just so super happy to be able to snap in what we did in Azure into the Power BI land with Fabric. It's really been a game changer for us.
That sounds great. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. So let's talk about FabCon, the conference we had a couple of weeks ago or 3 weeks ago.
Feels like years ago, doesn't it? But no, it was just weeks ago.
Looks like a lot has been passed. There was tons of updates about Fabric, especially on the Data Factory area. Tell us about some of the exciting updates in your area of the product.
Yeah, this was actually, I was going back and looking through this because we were doing a series of blogs on it and some updates for the blog and for some videos that we were making. And when we put the list together, I believe this was the largest single release that we've had for Data Factory since we started Fabric. Now Fabric is only a few years old, so I guess that's necessarily, the time frame isn't huge. But other than when we went to public preview, of course, we really delivered just a ton of new features at this last Fabric conference. So we're so super proud of that. We probably don't have time to cover them all, but if I focus on, like you said, on the area that I really worried most about, which is pipelines and ADF upgrades and observability, some of the things that we did was, this has been a really common request from our customers is that when you run a pipeline, the pipeline methodology inside of Data Factory from day one, still is today, is that you design your pipeline, then you're going to automate that on some kind of scheduled basis, right? There's a scheduler inside of Fabric, but it's meant to serve all purposes. So it's not necessarily tuned just for pipelines. So we've been adding things into that ability to trigger your pipeline. And one of the things we brought was the ability to use file triggers when you drop or delete or modify a file in OneLake. So that was asked for a lot. We brought that to everybody at FabCon.
That's the use case a lot of users are asking for, which is really helpful.
Yeah, exactly right. So if you have a process, maybe writing some files in your OneLake, in your lakehouse, as soon as those files land, when you got to kick off your pipelines, and maybe it's running some notebooks against that to process that data. That was a really important part of what we did. The other one that is near and dear to my heart, because I focus on data ops for all of Data Factory, is that we made generally available the CI/CD features within Data Factory. And this is a really new thing for Fabric, right? Is to bring this kind of rich data ops, DevOps. We call it data ops just in the data land, but it's DevOps essentially for data, to all of users within Fabric, so that you can collaborate, you can easily move between environments. One of the really key features that we launched was, in conjunction with our platform team, creating a new item type in Workspace. If you haven't seen this yet, you should check it out. It's called variable libraries. And in there, it sounds really simple, right? It's like a bag of variables that you can make and you can share across your artifacts. And not all items support it yet in Fabric, but we are getting there. We started with pipelines. I think Notebook supports it. You can have a variable that says, for example, location of my files is this variable, Reza's files. And you can say that it's always going to be in this folder location. Now you can share that across every artifact that you have, your notebook, your pipeline, eventually your data flow and everything else. Where that's really powerful is when you move from dev to test to prod, you can change that value because the variable can be set at the workspace level. And so that means that your same code can work exactly the way you want it to, depending on which environment that it's in, as it moves from dev to test to prod without changing your code at all. So it's super powerful, and that was another one that's kind of top of mind.
That variable definition between different object types is really helpful, because it is a way that we can kind of like automate things, get these objects connected to each other, which is really helpful. A lot of users have been asking for it. And also the one you mentioned before, like the ability to kind of like trigger the pipeline after a file has been added somewhere, so that this can monitor it. Something that's similar to like replacement of what we do with Power Automate, but now with Data Pipeline, because we can do a lot of other things which we cannot do with Power Automate. So this can be really helpful in that scenarios.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a really important point. And you had mentioned earlier too, is like, some things that we're working on within the Data Factory team. And we didn't have any announcements at FabCon in this area, but I will tell you that a lot of the feedback that we've gotten, and this came out pretty clear also at the Fabric conference, is that we should bring in some of the things that a lot of the we think of it kind of like citizen data integrators or citizen users of Power Platform have done over time, which is a Power Automate kind of style of doing things, that we should bring some of that into data pipelines inside of Fabric. We're definitely looking at doing that. Some things like being able to have different kinds of workflows that are more business-oriented workflows as opposed to data pipelines. That's an area of exploration for us, and that came out from the feedback we got. That is something that we're going to look at doing.
Awesome. That's great to know. And another thing that I hear a lot from users is that, like this might be in your plan in the future, but would we have the ability for multiple developers working on the same pipeline? Like, for example, I make some edits, another user makes some edits.
Yeah, it's that whole ability to kind of essentially change ownership on things actually is kind of the way that we think about what you're talking about. And it's a little bit different item to item within Fabric, and we're trying to consolidate and we're trying to reconcile that to have a single model for ownership on things. That is another area that we're working on in the next coming months, as a matter of fact.
That's good to know that this is coming. Okay, and if we talk about some of these things that are coming, it may be next month, it may be like, let's say, next year or things like that. It is helpful for our users, audience, to know what are in the plan, things that you can talk about. Please.
Yeah, so those are two examples. Another thing that we're looking at is we did, I think it was, believe it or not, I think we had 3 sessions that week at Fabric Conference on a very specific pattern within pipelines known as metadata-driven pipelines. And the reason why this is so popular is because, and we have emphasized this in ADF for years, we provide a model that I like to refer to as hyperparameterization of your pipelines, which means that you parameterize everything in it. Everything from the notebook that you call, the pipeline that you call, the connections that you have, all those can be parameterized, and you can store then those values in a data store outside of the design canvas. So you design once in a generic pattern way, and then you provide dynamic values for all those things through something like a SQL database table. It's so easy now in Fabric because now you have a SQL database there. Since we have the preview now of the SQL database, we have the SQL database essentially available to you now inside of Fabric, and then you store those values in there. And we had 3 sessions on this pattern that week. So there's a couple of things that we want to do to make that even easier. The variable libraries that I mentioned earlier is a great first step in the connection parameterization, but the story is incomplete right now. Right now, you have to use the GUID to replace your connection property. We're going to make that so that you can actually use a connection reference and use the name. That's something that we're working on. Another area that we're working on is adding, in lines with that hyperparameterization metadata-driven pattern, is to be able to allow you to have parameters inside of your schedules. So the scheduler is a platform feature in Fabric. In ADF, we did it a little differently because we actually owned the scheduler in ADF. And so we allowed you to set parameters for every time you trigger your pipeline from a schedule. That's missing in Fabric, and we're working on that. And that's another area that we really want to have land soon, yeah.
Yeah, that parameterization make that whole automation process, especially with large number of pipelines and things like that.
Yeah, because if you have 10 different scenarios, you don't want to have 10 different pipelines. You want to build your pipeline once and then use dynamic values to run it with those different property values all those 10 times. And that's what we enable with pipelines, yeah.
Awesome, that's great. Anything else we forgot to talk about that you'd like to mention?
Oh my gosh, tons of things. I'll just mention 1 or 2 more. So another really cool feature that we brought to market was something that, being in the ADF team and the Data Factory team for so long, there's a couple of things that we've been wanting to do for a long time. And one of them is to allow you to build even larger, more complex pipelines. We used to limit the number of activities you could have in your pipeline to 40. And that was for a number of reasons, including supporting our SLAs and being able to have you be able to run these without noisy neighbors. We've done all kinds of really strong, incredible things in the back end of our implementation that now we increase that to 120. So you can have 120 activities in your pipeline, which also leads to another problem, though, which is that it can become difficult to have a really large pipeline and find the properties and activities in that. So we're going to be adding some new UI features, so you can do a search and you can do a pan and zoom and those kinds of things. So it was something we didn't need to really necessarily worry about too much before, but now that we have these larger pipelines, we're going to do that. Last thing, so I'm glad you asked that question because it just triggered in my mind. I keep saying trigger, and it triggered in my mind, which is that we're going to bring to Fabric Data Factory is a feature called tumbling window triggers. And that is really popular in ADF, and it's something that we don't have in Fabric, but we're going to be bringing that, some point in the next couple of months. We'll start to see the ability to do tumbling window triggers in Fabric.
Awesome, that's great. Tons of updates, and thank you, especially thanks to you and the team who make this really helpful product for all of us to use. Now, just to wrap up things, what is the best platform for people to connect to you, ask any questions? I mean, like if they like specific things in the product, is LinkedIn the best platform to connect, or what is your preference?
Yeah, so for directly, LinkedIn is good. Yeah, absolutely, LinkedIn is good. And then for product ideas, I would definitely say use the Fabric Ideas site is the best way to do that. We as PMs in the team that we have within Data Factory, we look at that all the time. We're always looking at the latest feature requests in there and then the voting on it. So we use it to all the features I talked about we're working on. Many of those come from that forum. That's the best place for that. Yeah.
Yep, thank you. I appreciate that. We'll put the link to your LinkedIn down below, and also community.fabric.com. It used to be community.powerbi.com. Make sure you go and check it out. A lot of these work that the team are at the moment working on comes from that community ideas. People go put their ideas there and then evangelize the idea. Make sure you do that too, so that gets enough vote, and then someone from Fabric team gradually will get this into the priority list and they will start working on it. Awesome. Thank you, Mark, for your time. I really appreciate that. And we are looking forward to see all those new updates coming as we go.
My pleasure. Yeah, hopefully we can get to those real soon.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Bye.